I had always considered birthdays sacred, a time for celebration, reflection, and showing the people you love that you care. But this year my feelings toward my wife Sarah were far from celebratory. We had been married for 8 years, and over time, our relationship had become predictable, cold, and weighed down by petty grievances and unspoken resentments. The intimacy we once shared had dwindled to brief, perfunctory moments, and every attempt I made to rekindle that spark seemed to be met with disinterest or irritation. Her birthday approached, and I watched her make plans as usual: decorations, a fancy dinner, even invites to her closest friends. Normally, I would have scrambled to buy a thoughtful gift, to surprise her with some grand gesture. But this year I made a decision. I was done playing the role of the attentive husband who was taken for granted. I would skip her birthday, not out of spite but as a statement, as a reflection of the truth she had long ignored, that she had lost her ability to appreciate what she had, to see the effort and love that had built our life together. The morning of her birthday, Sarah expected me to be there, waiting with flowers or breakfast in bed, perhaps a card adorned with flowery words. But I didn't show up. I didn't send messages. I didn't even pick up my phone when she called. From her perspective, it must have looked like neglect or abandonment. But in reality, it was deliberate. A mirror held up to our marriage, reflecting the emptiness that had grown silently between us over the years. She paced the living room, phone in hand, growing anxious, frustrated, and bewildered. Hours passed. Her friends texted, asking why I wasn't present. And then came the first sign of panic, a message from Sarah herself, short and incredulous. "Where are you? Why haven't you done anything for my birthday?" She didn't understand that the absence itself was part of the message, the gift I had prepared. It was not a material item wrapped in paper and ribbons, but something far heavier, far more difficult to ignore. The weight of her own indifference reflected back at her. By the time evening came, I finally made my appearance. I didn't enter the house as usual, cheerful and apologetic. I stayed outside, letting the tension build, letting her imagination run wild with what could be coming. She opened the door, eyes wide, expecting perhaps a flustered explanation, a desperate attempt to smooth things over. But instead I handed her an envelope, simple, unassuming. Her brow furrowed as she took it, curiosity battling with apprehension. Sarah hesitated before opening the envelope. Inside was a letter, neat, precise, and painfully honest. I had written every word with care, not to hurt her, but to make her understand the reality she had been avoiding for years. The letter detailed the growing distance between us, the coldness that had settled in our home, and the way she had taken my presence, effort, and love for granted. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I wrote the truth, laying it bare in black and white. First, her reaction was confusion. She blinked, scanning the pages, muttering under her breath, I don't understand." I didn't interrupt. I didn't add commentary. The silence of the room was intentional. It allowed her to absorb the gravity of her own actions, to face the mirror I had held up to our marriage. The tension was thick, almost suffocating, but it was necessary. Too many years had passed with words left unsaid, with grievances buried beneath polite smiles and obligatory celebrations. After a few minutes, her eyes welled with tears. Not the exaggerated tears one might expect in a dramatic scene, but real, raw emotions, the kind that come from realizing that someone you love has been silently hurting, silently observing, and silently preparing a reckoning. She looked at me, voice trembling. "Is this really how you feel?" I nodded. "It's not just how I feel," I said quietly. "It's how our marriage has become. And it's how your actions have made me feel over the years." The moment was transformative. Sarah didn't yell, she didn't try to argue. She simply stood there, absorbing the reality of what her neglect had caused. It wasn't about punishing her. It was about communication, about showing her the consequences of indifference, about making her understand the effort it takes to maintain a relationship that she had stopped valuing. My absence, my silence, and the letter itself were the gift that she had never received before: awareness. Finally, she sank into a chair, hands covering her face. Her voice cracked as she whispered, I didn't realize." I allowed her the space to speak, to confront her own feelings while I remained calm, a steady presence. The beauty of this approach wasn't just in the shock value. It was in the clarity, the undeniable truth that could not be ignored or misinterpreted. By the end of the evening, the dynamic of our relationship had shifted. Sarah was no longer merely reacting to me as a husband who performed expected gestures. She was forced to confront her role in our marriage, the small acts of disregard that had accumulated over time. The gift I had given her wasn't something tangible. It was a moment of reckoning, one that would linger far longer than any bouquet of flowers or expensive piece of jewelry ever could. Over the next few days, Sarah's demeanor changed. There was no immediate apology, no grand gesture of reconciliation, but the shift was unmistakable. She became more attentive, more present, and far more reflective. The quiet moments we shared, previously filled with indifference, now held an intensity of awareness, a sense of acknowledgement that hadn't existed before. It was as if the silence and the letter had forced her to confront not just her actions, but the emotional gap that had been widening between us for years. I watched her carefully, noting the subtle changes, the way she asked about my day, the way she paused before brushing past me, as if considering the impact of every small gesture. She seemed more conscious of the effort it took to maintain a bond, and for the first time in a long while, I felt that our connection was mutual rather than one-sided. My absence gift had achieved what months of gentle nudging, reminders, and small gestures had failed to do. It was a lesson in perception, in awareness, and in the power of making someone see the reality they had long ignored. That evening, as we sat down for a quiet dinner, Sarah finally spoke with a voice that was both humbled and sincere. "I've been thinking about your letter," she said, pausing to find the right words. "I didn't realize how much I had taken for granted." "I'm sorry." I listened, not interrupting, not rushing to forgive or forget. Her apology was the first step, but the true change would be in her actions, in the way she approached our marriage moving forward. I realized then that the gift I had given her wasn't just for her. It was for us. It was a chance to reset, to reflect, and to rebuild something that had been fraying quietly over time. It was a reminder that love isn't just about gestures, gifts, or words. It's about attention, effort, and the constant recognition of the bond we share. My decision to skip her birthday, to remain absent, and to present her with the letter was more than a statement. It was a mirror held up to our relationship, reflecting both the pain and the potential for renewal. In the end, Sarah's birthday became unforgettable. Not for balloons, candles, or gifts, but for the moment of clarity it created. The silence, the absence, and the letter became the catalyst for understanding, introspection, and emotional reckoning. It was a gift that left her speechless, a lesson that would linger far beyond a single day. And as I watched her process, I knew that this was a turning point. Not just a birthday, but a reawakening of the awareness and care that our marriage deserved. Sometimes the most profound lessons aren't taught with words but with presence, or, in this case, absence. And that was the gift she would never forget.